For the longest time, I've wanted this item, the Sega Virtua Stick for the Sega Saturn. It seemed to be the perfect accessory for playing all of the amazing arcade games on the system, and I just never got around to it. It was one of those things where I saw it and I figured, it was expensive, I wasn't going to do it, and then finally it hit me. Saw it for $100 from Japan on eBay, and I picked it up, and I wanted to do a review here in 2020. You know, we have a lot of great arcade sticks out there, and what is this like if you're used to playing on something like a Hori Real Arcade Pro, or some homemade stick with Sanwa and Saimitsu buttons, things like that. How does it hold up? So, the first thing I'll say is the stick is rather nice. It has that nice kind of clicky feel to it. Very satisfying, so much better than the US Sega Virtua Stick, which was a toy. This feels like a semi-professional piece of hardware. Now, I did notice, as I researched this online, that some of these were, actually had a Saimitsu stick, and some just have an ASCII stick. And that's what I have here. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but basically, if it has this white notched design, kind of hard to see here, but you can find other videos that show it pretty clearly. It is the ASCII stick, and it's fine for what it is. Cosmetically, this is in very good condition. It has speed buttons to control all of the rapid fire functionality, and the start button is up here. It has a nice kind of layout. It sort of fits your hand nicely. You can use a whole bunch of different configurations. You can play, for the SNK games, you can use these if you want, and then get a little bit of space between the stick and the action buttons. I just use it typical 6-button fashion, and it's pretty effective. The only problem are the buttons. The buttons, I don't know if it's just this model, but they require a very deliberate center click. If you click off center, see if I can show this, they don't go down all the way. They kind of get stuck. In fact, when I first plugged this in, I believe the L button was really stuck, and I couldn't even start the games on the Saturn through the action replay. The menu was just kind of going crazy. And that is kind of annoying. In the center, a clean click. On the outside, some hesitation. And so as a result, at least with this model, the game feels, fighting games feel slow, imprecise, and that was actually a major disappointment. I don't know if that's going to be the case with all of these. These are pretty old now, and I thought, this was a nice cosmetic condition. There's some slight discoloration down here along the edge, but I figured this would be a pristine model, and nonetheless, it still suffers from that. So I can say for a game like the Virtua Fighter series, Fighting Vipers, things like that, it feels a lot better than the joypad. But for the Capcom 2D fighters, I don't know, something about these buttons make it rather difficult to play. Now, like I said, better than the US Sega Virtua Stick by far, even with the button issue. Not as great when you compare it to something like a modern Hori product. And if you're coming from that and thinking you're getting a version of that kind of a stick that would just happen to be released in Japan 20 plus years ago, that's not what this is. And it was really a joy to have the feeling of playing some of these Saturn arcade fighters with a proper arcade joystick. But it kind of begs the question, I think what we really need for the Saturn is something like the Brook Super Converter for the Saturn, so you can use a modern, high-quality stick up to today's standards with these great games. Because when you do plug a stick in, you do get a noticeably different, more arcade feel, and it just feels compromised by this button issue. Now, I will say that maybe that's just the deal with this stick. You might have one and it works great. I haven't stopped using it. I like the way it looks. I think it is an iconic Sega Saturn accessory, so I'm not upset for having purchased it. But just know, here in 2020, it's probably all about cosmetics, and you can't, and condition. You can't replace the buttons. They're soldered to the board inside, unless you have the skills to desolder, and I think they're an odd size button. They're not exactly 30 millimeters, so you'd have to adapt the case somehow. So I think we need a modern converter for the Saturn, but it's still an iconic piece. Happy to have it, and if you have one, let me know if the button issue is just my unit, or if this is a common problem.